Before the senators could come up with any firm plans, news came of another unexpected reverse, involving 4,000 cavalry that had been sent by the consul Servilius to his colleague, under the command of the propraetor Gaius Centenius. On receiving word of the battle of Trasimene, these had changed course, and had then been cut off in Umbria by Hannibal. The news inspired different reactions. The hearts of some were in the grip of a greater anguish, and this fresh loss of the cavalry they thought of little account compared with what had been lost earlier. Others would not consider the occurrence in isolation. When a body was sick, they said, any upset, however slight, was felt more seriously than a graver one was felt in good health. Likewise, when the Commonwealth was ailing and weakened, any stroke of misfortune should be measured not on an absolute scale, but with reference to its diminished capacity, which could stand no further burden. As a result, the citizen body resorted to a measure that had been neither needed nor employed for a long time, namely the appointment of a dictator. But a dictator could, it seemed, be named only by the consul, and he was away from the city. In addition, sending a messenger or letter through Italy, now occupied by the Carthaginian army, was no easy matter. Accordingly, the people took the hitherto unprecedented step of appointing a dictator themselves. They appointed Quintus Fabius Maximus, and they made Marcus Minucius Rufus his master of horse. These two were charged by the Senate with responsibility for reinforcing the city walls and their towers, for deploying sentries at points they thought appropriate, and for cutting down bridges across the rivers. People felt they now had to fight for the city and homes, since their defiance of Italy had been a failure. 9. Hannibal marched straight through Umbria as far as Spoltium. He wreaked havoc on the surrounding countryside and proceeded with an assault on the city, but was repulsed with heavy losses. He now reflected on the strength of his single colony, which he had attacked with little success, to gauge the difficulty he would have with the city of Rome, and then he changed course into the territory of Picenum. The land here was rich in all manner of produce, and well provided with goods for plunder, as well, and Hannibal's voracious and impoverished troops shown no restraint in seizing them. Hannibal maintained a stationary camp in the region for a number of days while the soldiers recovered from the rigors of the winter marches, from the trek through the swamps, and from the battle, which, successful though it proved to be, had been no trivial or easy affair. When the men had been sufficient When the men had been given sufficient rest, and in fact they enjoyed looting and pillaging more than inactiveness and rest, Hannibal went again ahead. He laid waste the land around Praetutia and Hadria, and after that the territory of the Marsi, the Marrucini, and Peligni, and the parts of Apulia closest to Arpi and Luceria. The consul Gnaeus Servilis had fought some minor battles with the Gauls, and taken one town of little importance. When he heard that his colleague had been killed and the army destroyed, he feared for the defenses of the capital and headed for Rome. He did not wish to be absent at the moment of her greatest peril. Quintus Fabius Maximus had now been made dictator for the second time. On the day of his entry into office, he convened the Senate and, opening the session with matter of religion, told the senators that the consul Gaius Flaminius' mistakes lay more in his disregard for ritual and auspices than in his recklessness and incompetence. The gods, said Fabius, should themselves be consulted on the means of appeasing heaven's anger, and he convinced the senators to take the decision hardly ever taken after other than when dire prodigies have been reported, namely to have the decemvirs consult the Sibylline books. After the decemvirs had consulted the oracular writings, they reported back to the senators, and there had been some irregularity in the formulation of the vow made to Mars for that war. It should be formulated again, and on a more generous scale, with great games vowed to Jupiter and temples to Venus of Eryx and Mens. Public prayers and lectisternum were also to be held, and a vow taken to hold a sacred spring in the camp turned out successfully, and the republic remained in the same condition in which it had been before the war. Since Fabius was going to be busy with the conduct of war, the Senate followed the advice of the College of Pontiffs, and instructed the praetor Marcus Aemilius to see that these measures were greatly implemented. 10. When these senatorial decrees had been passed, the praetor consulted the pontifical college and the Pontifex Maximus. Lucius Cornelius Lentulus was of the view that their first priority was to put the question of the sacred spring before the people. That vow, he claimed, could not have been made without the authority of the people. The question was put to the people in the following words: Is it your will and command that such measures be implemented? Should the republic of the Quertes, the Roman people, be kept safe for the next 5 years, as I wish and pray, throughout these wars, the war of the Roman people with the people of Carthage, and the wars against the Gauls living this side of the Alps, let the Quertes, the people of Rome, offer and make this gift: all pigs, sheep, goats, and cattle that the spring shall have brought forth are to be sacrificed to Jupiter, provided that they are not already consecrated to a god, from the day so decreed by the Senate and people. Let whosoever makes this sacrifice make it when he wishes and in the manner he wishes, and whatever his manner of making it, let the sacrifice be considered duly made. If the animal that is due to be sacrificed dies, let it be considered as unconsecrated, and with no guilt attaching to it. If anyone should unwittingly damage or kill the beast, let him not be regarded as culpable. Should anyone steal it, neither the people of Rome nor the individual from whom it is stolen are to be considered guilty. If the sacrifice is unknowingly performed on a day of ill omen, let it still be considered properly made, and if it is performed by day or night, by a slave or a freeman, let it be considered properly made. If it is performed before the time the Senate and people have decreed, let the people be considered exempt and quit of the vow. For the same purpose, great games were included in a vow, and the cost of them was to be 333,333 and a third asses. Is that a joke? Anyway. In addition, 300 oxen were to be sacrificed to Jupiter, and white oxen and other sacrificial animals to numerous other gods. When the vows had been duly formulated, a period of public prayer was proclaimed, and these were attended not only by the urban populace with their wives and children, but also by such country people as the same property and consequently took some thought for the public good. Then a 3-day Lextisternium was held under the supervision of the Decemvirs for sacrifices. 6 couches were put on display, one to Jupiter and Juno, a second to Neptune and Minerva, a third to Mars and Venus, a fourth to Apollo and Diana, a fifth to Vulcan and Vesta, and a sixth to Mercury and Ceres. Jesus Christ. After this vows of temples were made, the dictator Quintus Fabius Maximus made the vow of a temple for Venus of Eryx, because the oracular books had prescribed that the vow be formulated by the man holding the highest office in the state, and the praetor Titus Otacilius made a vow of the temple for Mars. These goddamn Roman names, they slow your fucking reading down to a crawl. Roadblock, sound it out, roadblock, sound it out, roadblock. Anyway, religious observances completed, the dictator now opened discussions of the war and the Senate of the Republic, seeking opinion of the senators on the specific legions and the number of them, with which he should face their triumphant foe. It was decided that Fabius should take over the army of the consul Gnaeus Servilius, but that he should, in addition, enlist from the citizens and the allies as great a force of cavalry and infantry as he thought appropriate. He was also to take all other measures and decisions as he thought to be in the state's interest. Fabius declared that he would add 2 legions to Servilius's army. When he had enlisted these, using the services of the master of horse, he proclaimed a date on which they were to mobilize at Tibur. He also issued an edict for all people whose towns and settlements lacked fortifications to move to places of safety, and for all those in the area along the route, Hannibal was likely to take leave their farms. These people were to burn their buildings and destroy their crops before departing, so as to leave the enemy no supplies of any kind. Fabius then set off along the Flaminian Way to meet the consul and his army, and near Ocriculum, on the banks of the Tiber, he caught sight of the column, and of the consul, who was proceeding towards him with his cavalry. He thereupon sent an attendant to inform the consul that he should come to the dictator without his lictors. Servilius complied with the order, and the meeting of the 2 men did much to alert citizens and allies to the high standing of the office of dictator. With the passage of time, they had forgotten the authority it carried. At this point, a letter arrived from the city with news that transport vessels carrying supplies from Ostia to the army in Spain had been captured off the port of Cosa by the Carthaginian fleet. The consul was ordered to leave for Ostia immediately. He was instructed to man the ships lying at anchor at the city of Rome or at Ostia with marines and crews, and with these vessels to give chase to the enemy fleet and patrol the coast of Italy. Men were conscripted in large numbers in Rome, and even freedmen who had children and were of military age had sworn the oath of allegiance. Members of the urban force, who were under 35 years of age, were assigned to the ships, and the others were left to guard the city. 12. Assuming command of the consul's army from the legate Fulvius Flaccus, the dictator marched through Sabine's territory to Tibur. It was there that he had fixed the rendezvous for his new recruits. He then moved on to Praeneste, and by taking various byways, emerged on the Latin way. After that, reconnoitering the roads with extreme care, he marched towards the enemy, determined not to trust to luck anywhere unless circumstances forced him to. On the first day that Fabius pitched camp with sight of the enemy, it was not far from Arpi. The Carthaginian leader immediately led his troops out for action and offered battle. But he could not see nothing stirring on the enemy side, and no signs of activity in their camp. He therefore returned to camp, uttering disdainful comments. The Romans' famed military spirit had been crushed. They were a conquered people, and they had openly admitted they were no match for him in valor and glory, he said. But in his heart he felt unspoken concern. How do you know if it was in his heart, Livy? What the hell? His dealings henceforth would be with a commander nothing like Flaminius or Sempronius, and the Romans had finally been taught by hard experience to choose one who was Hannibal's equal. Indeed, he felt immediate apprehension about the dictator's wariness. But as yet, he had not put the man's determination to the test, and so he began to harass and provoke him. He would frequently move camp, and he would lay waste the lands of the allies before his eyes. At one moment, he would accelerate his march and disappear from view. Then suddenly, he would take up a concealed position at some curve in the road, hoping to catch Fabius unawares if he came down to the plain. Fabius led his column along higher ground, keeping a short distance from the enemy so as not to lose contact with him, but not engage him either. His men were confined to camp except in case of pressing need. Food and wood-gathering expeditions were not undertaken with small numbers or over a large area. There was a unit of cavalry and light infantry drawn up, ready to meet any sudden assault, and this provided complete security for his own men and also posed a threat for scattered foragers of the enemy. There was no question of risking everything on an overall engagement, and minor and unimportant brushes with the enemy, conducted from points of safety and with shelter close by, brought the men to have fewer concerns about their fighting capabilities and fortunes after the fright of their earlier defeats. However, Fabius found no more hostility to this sound strategy. in Hannibal than he did in his master of horse, and this man's subordinate command was all that held him back from destroying the Republic. He was arrogant and impulsive in judgment, and too quick with his tongue, talking first to a few men and then openly before the ranks. He began to call Fabius' deliberate hesitation idleness, and his caution cowardice, and he pinned on him faults that bore some relation to his real virtues. In this way, he kept trying to exalt himself by maligning his superior, a loathsome practice that has become more widespread because many have found it all too successful.